Make sure you check out our online store where we work with our graphic designer to create stunning garment and product designs that feature a wide variety of aircraft types such as British fighters, World War II aircraft, American bombers, Russian fighters and much more. You can pick your favourite designs and personalise any items within our Redbubble store that range from clothing right the way through to stationery. All of our designs feature our logo so you can show your support for the channel while getting a quality product. You can head to our website aircrewinterview.tv and click store, or go to redbubble.com/people/AC interview. Thank you and enjoy. So Sumit, when did you first become interested in aviation?
Well, Mike, my father was in the army. And we moved from place to place. And I guess it was 1960 when we moved to one of our bases in Punjab in the north called Ambala. And that had gnats and hunters at that time, nice. 1960. What I found was when we landed up there, I was a kid. I was 9 years old, and we found these jets, zipping overhead at low level, the hunters, and making a huge noise. And at first time it frightened me like hell, but the excitement it generated was probably where it all started, I guess. Then I went into a boarding school. A very British-oriented. In fact, we had more British instructors or teachers than Indians. And we were permitted only certain comics. We were not permitted the run-of-the-mill comics. So Eagle comics would come from England. And then there were these books in the library. So, I was fascinated, I would say, with Biggles and, some of these other Johnny Johnson stories and stuff like that in the Second World War. So I guess that's where the excitement all started. And then, of course, I saw the naval uniform somewhere, and that was another excitement. So I said, why not combine the two? And so actually, I was keen on becoming a Fleet Air Arm pilot.
Wow.
A Navy pilot. Yes.
Wow, yeah. So I was just the next question is why did you join the Air Force rather than the Fleet Air Arm? What was that? What decision pushed you to the Air Force side?
Oh, strange, but I was listening to some of your other podcasts, and I heard one of my officers in the Indian Air Force. I went through a sort of a similar sort of an experience. I went for my examination or whatever it is for the interview for the Navy, and after the interview finished, they had a medical, and I failed my medical. They failed me for eyesight, for night vision. So I went back home and I said, that's it. I can't join. And I get a call to say that report to another base, the place called Dehradun, where they have the Air Force set up. And they have a thing called a PABT, which is the Pilot Aptitude and Battery Tests. It's specific to the guys who are joining the Air Force. And I had given first choice as the Navy, second choice as the Air Force, and third choice as the Army. For joining the academy, actually. And we have this joint academy. I think Anil Golani has spoken to you on that. Prior to joining that. And so I went for the PABT, and that had some fascinating tests to be done. Of course, I'm talking about 1966. So we had some very rudimentary stuff, but they were pilot aptitude. The little cockpit and the little TV screen, and like the video games kids play today. But more rudimentary than that. But they were fascinating. I did fairly well. The motor control or the coordination was good, I guess. So they sent me to a medical in Delhi. And the doctor, he sees my papers and he says, I say, you failed your medical for eyesight. You're the Navy. I said, yes. Then he said, you can't join the Air Force because the Air Force is a little more rigid on eyesight. So I said, well, guess that's it. So he said, okay, let's just test you out. They tested me for my eyes and they said it's absolutely perfect. There was something wrong on the other side. They gave me a piece of a form to fill up to appeal to the Navy to take me back. And I was going home in a bus. I was pretty, I didn't know really what to do. And I said the Navy, didn't treat me well. So I crumpled up that piece of paper and threw it in the nearest dustbin. So when the call came for the academy, it came as an Air Force officer. So that's how I joined the Air Force.
Brilliant story. That's really interesting. So can you tell us some of the initial aircraft you started your basic training on and what they were like to fly?
We start with the propeller aircraft, and it was a copy of the Chipmunk, the British Chipmunk.
Oh, okay.
It was made by our Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL, and it was called the HT2, the Hindustan Trainer 2. But it was, looking at it, it looks exactly like a Chipmunk, more or less. Mm-hmm. So that's the initial training, 6 months. And then you move on to, we have a 3-stage training system, 6 months each. And this is after my academy, 3 years of the academy, right? Mm-hmm. Joint training. After that, this for the Air Force guys, it's a 1.5 year further training. And from there, I moved on to the Harvard, or the T6 Texan. Mm-hmm. So we had the Harvard 4Bs, I think, and the T6 Texan, not the present Texan, or the later Texan that the Americans got. This is the old one, Second World War variety, with the huge engine cowling in front and stuff like that, tail wheel. Brilliant aeroplane, a fighter pilot's aeroplane, really. And then from there to my last stage of flying training, which was on jets. After the second stage, we get, split into guys going into transport stream and the fighter stream. So it's, one is by merit, capability. There are various factors that one looks into. The student, whether he's fit to go fighters or would he do better in transports and helicopters. So in our days, it was only a bifurcation. And nowadays, there's a trifurcation. The helicopter stream is now as important as anything else. So I went into the fighter stream. And so we flew Vampires. Nice. The Vampire, what was it? 56 was the 2-seater, and the Vampire 52 was the fighter. We had Vampires in the Indian Air Force. They were used in daylight strikes initially, and then it became the official night fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Yes. So we trained on the Vampire and for another 6 months. And I graduated in January of 1972. I missed the 1971 war. Actually, we were to be commissioned on the 3rd of December 1971 as per the plan. And that's the day the war started. Yeah. So, and we knew it. So they had pushed our commissioning date further ahead, postponed it into January. So we missed the war.
Yes, and so how long, you mentioned there how many months it took, but how long did it take from initial flying training to be selected to your first frontline aircraft that you were going to go and train on?
So once you finish your Vampire, those days Vampire stage, that's your training, and you get commissioned as a pilot officer. you first move into an operational training unit, OTU. I think the Brits also have, the RAF also has, we follow the British system more or less,
Yes.
to a large degree. And so we had an OTU with Hunters. So we flew the Hunters. And that was your first initiation into a modern, I would say, fighter aircraft, which had just come out of the war. We had a lot of war heroes in OTU at that time. They'd done a marvelous job. And so we trained under these guys who were fresh out of the war. They came out of the war in December 71 and January 72 we were there. So we were trained under under some of the guys who had, the adrenaline still going,
Yeah.
And they were full of beans and then they put us through the mill to make sure that, we are groomed correct. And that's how we started. So that was another 6 months. It's not much, about 35, 40 hours on the Hunter. And then you move into the fighter aircraft, which are the frontline fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Those days, we had the MiG-21 and the Su-7 were quite new. We had the Hunters and the Gnats. So one is, a lot of us, most of us, in fact, were sent for what they called a high-performance medical to check your, medical fitness for high-altitude supersonic flying and stuff like that. They put us through a specific medical, and we went through that. And then we were taken out based on whatever the merit and the capability-wise into MiGs, MiG-21s, Su-7s, and Hunters and Gnats. So we went into 4 different areas from the group. So I went into the MiG-21.
We're going to get into one of my favourite planes, the MiG-23 and obviously the 27. So can you tell us the role of the MiG-23 with the Indian Air Force when it came into service, and what were your first thoughts on the aircraft?
Well, when the MiG-23 came into the Indian Air Force, I never got to fly it at that time. I was flying the MiG-21 at that time when the MiG-23 was inducted. And very shortly after the MiG-23 was inducted, and we inducted initially the 2 types. One was the BN, the MiG-23 BN, which was a ground attack, purely ground attack. And one was the MiG-23 MF, which was a purely air defense aircraft. So the design and the shape of the 2 were different, where the MiG-23 BN, the ground attack, had the duckbill nose for better forward visibility when flying at low level. And the MiG-23 MF had the traditional nose with the radar inside the nose cone and stuff like that, the airborne interception radar. And very shortly after these 2 were inducted, we inducted the MiG-25. So I transitioned, actually. You don't say, transition, I would say this, I was selected. You get selected into these little pools and into the stream. And I was selected to fly the MiG-25 rather than the MiG-23 and the 27. So I've actually flown the 25 well before I flew the MiG-23 and the 27.
And yeah, well, we're going to get onto the MiG-25 part later because, as I say, I want to focus on the 23 and 27. But can you tell us a bit about your ground training on the 23? And obviously, you had wing sweep. Was that a big problem going through the ground training, or was it easy for you to get hold of?
The MiG-23, up front, let me tell you that I have flown the MiG-23 U, or the UB as they call it, is the two-seater trainer only. I didn't fly the fighter. And I flew the MiG-27. So I've flown the MiG-23U and the MiG-27. And yes, the wing sweep was a big problem in the sense for a guy who's not used to it. But we went through a ground training program. For most aircraft, they put you through a ground training first, and which lasts for about 3 weeks or so, where all the systems, you familiarize yourself with all the systems and what's on board and the capabilities, and you study the whole thing. You go around the airplane. The aircraft is all opened up by the technicians for you to see and physically check as to what is what, from the engine to the radars to the instruments to everything else. What you would, I'm sure you are aware, the Russian standardization of the cockpit was very good. Mm-hmm. And a guy transitioning from the MiG-21 to the 23 to the 20 variants of the MiG-23 to the 25, right up to the 27, 29, would feel very familiar looking at the cockpit.
Right.
Those days we were still on the analog, cockpit. There was no glass cockpit. Let me tell you a very, very funny sort of incident. One of our chiefs came to see the MiG-25 when I was there, and the chief at that time, and we were showing him the airplane, and he hadn't seen it till then. And so he climbed up, and he's an old hand on the MiG-21 himself. So he climbs the ladder and he peers into the cockpit and he looks at it and he says, "Hey, this looks very familiar." Because, the MiG-25 cockpit looked exactly like the MiG-21 that he was familiar with. Right. And then he steps into the cockpit and sits down and he says, "Damn it, it even smells the same." So you see, that's the standardization of the Russians. When you transitioned from one to the other, you felt comfortable in the cockpit as far as the instrumentation was concerned and the layout of the instruments. So that part was fine. The trouble of flying the MiG-23 or the 27 was the wing sweep, one, and the fact that the tail was very low and very close to ground. It was just about 8 inches off the ground. So the problem was when you came in for a landing and you had a ventral fin for stability, longitudinal stability. The ventral fin folds up, and once you take off and you raise the wheels, as the undercarriage retracts, the fin comes down. So now you have the wheels up and the fin is down. The tail fin is down. So you have the vertical fin on top and you have the tail fin below. And when you come in for a landing and you lower the wheels for the landing, as the wheels come down, the ventral fin folds up. And that is why I think this is the only aircraft in the world where you don't call 3 greens when you come in for a landing. You call 4 greens.
That's brilliant.
Right? Yeah. So that was necessary. But with the ventral fin up and folded, you still had only 8 inches of clearance. Yeah. That was crazy. Wow. And 8 inches is just this much.
Yeah.
So 8, maybe 9, whatever. The fact is that when you landed, you couldn't flare out like you do in most aircraft. You come in and flare out and get the nose up and you do some aerodynamic braking once you touch down before you use the brakes. You couldn't do that. You had to come in at a particular attitude which was very, very specific, which was unforgiving, I would say. Because if you were lower, you would hit the nose wheel. And if you were a little too much, you would hit the tail.
Wow.
So your perspectives had to be very, very correct, very good. So when you trained and you on the two-seater, and the instructor, the pilot at the back, gave you the instruction, you had to be very clear as to who you clear to fly solo and keep on the MiG-23. Because if you found that the pilot was weak in as far as these perspectives are concerned, he's not fit to be on that aeroplane. We had a lot of cases of, not a lot, but a few of PIO, pilot-induced oscillations, where guys hit the ground, bounced off, hit the nose wheel, came back because of attitude. 3-4 times.
Yeah.
The undercarriage, also, which you would have seen, is a very, very peculiar sort of an undercarriage off the belly, rather than on the wings, and it's very close to the fuselage. It's a fantastic design. There was a student in a university who designed this thing. This is what we've heard from the Russians. And he was given a national prize by the president of Russia for this particular design. It was one of its kind and a very unique design that he made. It was a student who did it in the university, yes.
Incredible. And
yes.
Could you, coming from the MiG-21, was there a power difference on that first, take off with reheat? Or could you feel it more in the MiG-21? Because it seems like the engine on the 23 and 27 is quite a big engine. Could you feel that power?
Yes. On the MiG-21, when you kick in the afterburner, you get this kick on the back and push, and the surge as the aircraft starts to accelerate. The MiG-23 and the 27, the kick is about the same. The surge is definitely more. You can feel the surge.
Right.
But at the same time, I would say that comparatively, the weight difference of the aircraft is also there.
Of course, yeah.
So while the surge is there, the acceleration is more or less the same. And because of its 16-degree wing sweep on takeoff, the takeoff is very short, very, very short on the MiG-23 and the 27. And she doesn't take off in the traditional, nose up way that all aircraft take off. She sort of flies off the ground, literally straight.
Sits there.
It's a peculiar feeling initially. And once you get up and you put the wheels up, then you can rotate the nose up and move.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about the wing sweep on the 23 and 27. I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that both aircraft couldn't sweep above, is it 3G in a 3G turn? You had to be relatively, on 1G or 2G. Is there any truth to that?
Yes. So if you were wanting to sweep the wing from 16 to 45 and then to 72, you would need to offload the G to do the sweep and then get back to the G that you desired, which was a severe limitation. But you would understand the aircraft was not designed for air combat or close-in combat. So the requirement of changing these was very limited, I would say. We utilized the aircraft, the MiG-27, in all three features of the 16, the 45, and the 72 in the Top Gun school That's our TACD, Tactics and Air Combat Development Establishment, because that's where the guys with the maximum experience come there to do the course and fly there. And one is they have the capability, and they know the safety margins, and they are able to know when the transition is required, because there we go through some very rigorous exercises, which sometimes demands the necessity, I would say, to sweep or change sweep in between the missions. Yes.
And yeah, obviously, like sticking on with the 23 here, obviously you and the U, which was the trainer. Did you ever conduct a DACT or BFM, and how did the 23 fare against the types you went up to and trained against?
In DACT, Mike, let me just. I'll request you that I talk on the MiG-27, because the MiG-23 in DACT and the MiG-27 performed more or less the same. MiG-27 was heavier. So in our Top Gun school in TACD, we had 2 flights. One flight was the MiG-21 flight, and one flight was a MiG-27 flight.
Right.
So you always flew mixed. So we had guys coming from the MiG-27s who would fly, or 23s and 27s who would fly the MiG-27, and the MiG-21 guys would fly the MiG-21s.
Right.
And the first exercise, or the first sortie that you flew in TACD when you came to do the course, was a 1 versus 1 of a dissimilar type.
Nice.
So you flew MiG-27 against MiG-21 just to get the feel. Now they've done it in the squadrons, because we exercise even in the squadrons between aeroplanes, and there's a lot of experience that is gained in the squadron itself. And TACD just takes you to a level where you are reaching the far corners of the envelope of each aeroplane. You're put to the extremes of handling of the aeroplane and sort of getting the maximum out of it in your training syllabus. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk a bit about the cockpit, because was it a comfortable environment? Let's go for the 27 here. Was it comfortable? Because I've seen a 27 and it looks quite cramped.
After the MiG-21, it was a pleasure to get into a MiG-27. Yes.
Right.
I think you would be aware of the fact that the Russians were not too good on their ergonomics.
No.
So you had, you would bump into all sorts of stuff in the cockpit. They were not comfortable cockpits. The seats were not very comfortable. But the fact is, the MiG-27 was certainly much wider than the MiG-21. And so for us, who had a very extensive background on the MiG-21, the MiG-27 was a very comfortable cockpit, space-wise. Switches and stuff like that, accessible, yes, much better than a MiG-21. But yes, they do have some of them in awkward places. I wouldn't say it was too bad. It wasn't as bad as one would think it was once you start flying it. And if you come from a Western aeroplane, say a Jaguar or a Mirage, and you come into a MiG-27, yes, it would look cramped, it would feel cramped and all that. But if you're a regular MiG guy, I think it was fine.
Yeah, so what kind of weapons and armament could the 27 carry in your time?
The MiG-27 it carried, I think, about 8 tons of, 6 or 8 tons of armament. And you would carry a mix of weapons. One was the rocket pods. You know, you have the UBA rocket pods.
Yes.
And the UBA 16 and the UBA 32. You know, and if you carried 4 rocket pods and 32 rockets each, it's the volume of fire which is immense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can expect any survivability in the swath of where the rockets go. That was the rockets. The gun, of course, is a very, very famous gun, the Gatling.
Yes.
The Gasha 630, 30 millimeter. It was a monster. It was a monster gun. And it would shake up the airplane very badly. The kick that you got out of it, or the recoil, was, I mean, forget about heart stopping. It almost stopped the aeroplane. So you had personally, I've used it only for very short bursts, and you use it for about half a second burst or so. Oh. And but it was a frightening experience. The first time you fired it, honestly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That was huge. We had some of the air-to-surface weapons which were very, very effective and good, and there were some of these. We had anti-radiation missiles too on the MiG-27. So it was fairly potent weapon systems that we had on board the aircraft.
Absolutely. And just on a side note, before we wrap up the 23 and 27 part, I heard that both aircraft are very quick down low.
Oh, yes. Both the aircraft at low level, for what it was designed for, were brilliant. They were rock steady at how much? 60 meters, 200 feet, 30 meters, 100 feet. That's 100 feet. And they were rock steady. And we used to do these lay down passes, as you call it, with some of these weapons which are retarders and stuff like that, retarder bombs. And you fly in at 50 meters, that's 150 feet. And she was rock steady. Rock steady. You engage the afterburner at low level, and she will go like a rocket. I mean, the power infusion and the speed or the acceleration was absolutely phenomenal in both these aeroplanes. I've flown it up to 1100, 1200, just short of Mach 1, and she's rock steady, but she starts to sort of oscillate a bit around 1100 onwards, beyond 1150 or so. A little bit of oscillation, you got to be a little, she's a little heavy too. So you need to hold it a little tight. Mm-hmm. I'm not a very big built guy. I'm small. I'm 5 feet 6 inches tall. And so I needed all my strength to hold on to it before she runs away. And most Russian airplanes will run away from you if you don't control it within the speed limits.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll give you a top speed that, the aircraft is capable of this. But if you let her go, she will go beyond that. She'll exceed.
Yeah, I've heard that many a time, Sumit. But if you can maybe share one or two memorable stories from your time, either flying the 23 or 27 with our viewers, that would be great.
Well, my biggest problem was I transitioned to a swing wing airplane at a very late stage of my life, when I think all my peer group had finished their flying careers. And I was a group captain and a colonel. And I was sent as the commandant of Top Gun School, and that's when I transitioned into the MiG-23 and the 27. So at that last stage of life of flying, of effective flying, I would say, when everybody else has finished their effective flying, you're still continuing. You've gone past your peak, I would say, of orientation as far as a squadron line pilot is concerned. And with so much of experience on the MiG-21, the 23, then being an instructor on trainer aircraft, now you suddenly come to something like this. There were 2 occasions, I think, when I was about to start rolling with my wings still at 72, rolling for takeoff.
No.
And I would get a call from someone, either the ATC or from somebody in the formation, to say that 16, just a sharp call, 16. And then I knew what was wrong. And so you pull the lever on 16, and so she would sweep forward. I've actually done it on a roll. I've started my takeoff roll and been told that 16, and I've swept it forward and then continued with the takeoff, yes. Nothing more memorable, I would say, on the MiG-27 other than firing the gun, which was a memorable experience. And to do these lay-down attacks, level attacks, very low and at high speed, coming in at 900 kilometers per hour and exiting at 1150 kilometers per hour. It was a fantastic experience. You're close to treetop level, and so we were in terrain which was suitable for this sort of thing, operating there, and it was a wonderful experience. Yes,
absolutely, I can imagine. But how many hours did you get on the 23 and 27 combined?
Not much. In 2 years, since I was also flying the MiG-21 as the commandant, and as the commandant, I don't need to fly all the time with these guys. You see, you're the boss, so you choose and select what you want to fly and what levels you want to fly, and so I would do some of these check sorties with the students who were doing the course. So I didn't really get to fly the 23 and the 27 too much. And I would say that I had in 2 years, about 120, 130 hours. I don't have my logbooks here. I'm sitting in the United States, so I could have told you specific.
That's still impressive.
But not too much.